get back on Bret, man.
He just can't. I mean, I keep getting sick of it, and I'm like, I just don't want anything to do with it. And then you send me a clip, and I'm like 5 minutes in, and I'm like, someone has to call out this shit. This is ridiculous. And then I'm super conflicted, as you know from the text that I sent to you.
It happened. I went through probably more than 6 weeks where I didn't pay attention to a single thing they did because I really don't want to. But this is like where I'm coming to with it, which it's where I thought this all along, but like it's crystallizing how it works. Like I can see it better now. Like they run all the trial runs on ideas and people as potential leaders or tools in their toolbox through that pipeline.
Right word, by the way, tool is the right word because he is a tool in all connotations of the word.
What he is like the handyman, and he's like when the other tools want to join the box, they have to like come through and see if the audience is buying it. Do they like him? Do they solve a problem that the prior one posed? And so when I saw that, so I've been paying attention to something for several weeks now, and I can't say this gentleman's name, but there's an Indian doctor from the UK.
Don't limit yourself. You can totally say it.
Asim, I don't have it in front of myself right now, so I'm not looking.
Malhotra?
Asim Malhotra, right? Who has suddenly over the last sort of 6 weeks to 3 months started popping up, and then it got to a point a couple of weeks ago where like everywhere I looked, there he was, and then of course he was on the Dark Horse podcast, right? Now this person says things that are like largely, not entirely reasonable, and in some ways he has a good and like a pleasant temperament, and he doesn't seem to be super arrogant and full of himself like some of the people. He's still a little bit, but not as much as like Malone or go ahead.
I think he's the new Majid, but he's easier to control. And that's like straight up.
Right. Okay. So, but he comes across in a way that I could see that like a lot of people would find him pleasant and reasonable and handsome, and he smiles, and he's not like super, he doesn't have this like sort of arrogant,
He's palatable. He's digestible.
Yeah, he's digestible, right? And most of what he says, and this is why it's such a challenge here, is reasonable. Most of what he says, but we have another person here who only felt it necessary to begin digging into the dark waters and then eventually speaking out once he has suffered a personal loss, right? And that, unfortunately, in this case, and sympathies, he lost his father to complications that he believes are from the, yeah, I know, the right. So then he started looking at things a little differently. And there's nothing wrong with that process, except for now he's, like I've been talking about, and we'll talk about in the afterwards that we already recorded, and you'll see after, like he's now moved to the front of the classroom as the new authority that we should all listen to because he figured reality out last week. And I'm like, this is the pattern every single time. Now, it feels to me like either other people had some of the same criticisms of a lot of these people that we've had, or people are paying attention and trying to solve the problem that people like you and I pose. And the very next person that's offered up their audition on the Dark Horse podcast or all these other places, something about their reality and their story solves a problem that the other person did not. And I'll say what that is in a second. Go ahead.
Okay, so it just hit me that they are, and you've said this a lot, how we are on their, like, we're part of their op because we clue in and they're like, oh, that could be a problem months or years down the line. Thank you, Danny and Emily. Here's how we're going to meet that problem. It was very obvious. I tried to watch the Tucker one, which was the first time you put him on my radar, and it was just unlistenable. I forced myself with Bret, and you could tell that he was auditioning and Bret was handling him. And it was interesting to see Bret in the Dom position because he's usually sub with Heather and Eric, right? But it was so obvious in this one. He's like, I'll be a good boy and you can play. It's like good cop, bad cop, sub-dom with the IDW shills.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's kind of what it was. So he comes in, and the problem that he solves is that he didn't just wake up. In some ways, this puts him in a worse category, right? It puts him in like the RFK category, as we'll talk about in the show that we already recorded, but you'll see later. But he has a previous history of questioning and going after big pharma for their like immoral and overuse of pharmaceutical drugs for inappropriate things, and not paying attention or not promoting that diet and lifestyle and exercise and all that kind of stuff is actually the most important thing that a person can do to prevent serious illness, right? And seems to have a background where other people acknowledge that that is something he does. So, okay, this person has called out pharma before. And for some people, that'll be like, well, see, like he's good. He called out pharma. But wait a second, if he already is suspicious of pharma, then like, why hasn't it ever occurred to him before? Not only that if not that there could be a problem with certain items, but that even if there were no problem with them at all, it's entirely reasonable for people, based on the way they screwed up the drugs, to not want anything to do with any of their shit. And so they're not really conspiracy theorists, they're just sense makers.
It reminds me of the same pattern that's going on with Rebel Wisdom and that doctor with the Z who we did a couple.
Yeah.
They're the same. They're playing the same role. It's the same pattern. It's the same formula.
He's better than the Z guy. The Z guy was too like nakedly borderline psychopathic, in my opinion, or something like that. Like it was too obvious, right?
My favorite. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
My favorite part of this one, and I'm trying to see if I actually pulled the clip in all the clips that I pulled. I did pull it, so I don't know if we want to just jump into. Oh, I can't hear you, babe.
Let's do this. Let's start going through your clips, because probably everything I have to say can be said in commentary post watching whatever clips you've pulled, and if not, we'll complete the exercise at the end.
Okay, help me be my brain, because one clip just popped up first, but it's not in chronological order, or I can go in chronological order.
I don't care. Like, I don't know. Time isn't linear, so who cares? Go in whatever order you want.
Okay, so will you help me remember 5531, and I'm going to cue it up, and you can entertain the troops while I get
5531. Dun, 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 dun. So anyway, for those those who haven't seen this interview, you're not going to learn anything you didn't already know, like information wise, but this was a really interesting one to watch in terms of the shifting characteristics and dynamics of the op.
Okay, this piece that I'm about to share, which is in the middle, I think is the biggest, most important piece of this interview, and it's so fucking laughable. So I'm gonna hold my commentary and just share it with us. Okay, here we go. Oh shit, sorry, sound.
For declaring them safe for children. And, you know.
Hang on. Here we go. I'm just gonna go back a little bit so we can be sure to hear it.
The funny thing about this story, and the strange punchline of it, is I now see these mice reemerge in the recent test that was the basis for declaring them safe for children. And, you know, it's odd. I find myself whistleblower twice over in the same story.
Oh my God! Now he's a whistleblower. We've heard this story multiple times from Bret and from Eric, but as the embellishment continues to change and they're like, will the public buy this? Will the public buy this? Now Bret is a big pharma whistleblower.
Twice. About the length of telomeres in mice. And hopefully if I can like work out, I forgot to do it last night. I totally forgot once I got home. There is an absolute hysterical little audio clip that Danny sent me while listening to the show the other day that we will post for our supporters on Locals. That is like, you know, Comedy Central channel worthy of like, oh, they might censor her. I don't know.